Okay, I'd like to go ahead and start. I think we're still waiting on a couple of committee members, but we've got one, I guess. First of all, my name is Matt Boucher. Thanks for everyone coming. And I want to just maybe ask that you bear with me a little bit. It's going to take me a little time to get up to speed, but I'll try to be as efficient as possible. But any help would be appreciated. And maybe if we could just go around the room right now and introduce ourselves. Again, Matt Boucher. I'm from Melbourne, real estate. I'm also several Airbnbs that I do, and kind of excited to learn about the beach committee. A lot of information, and I don't think anybody expects everybody something everybody would know everything all. So, with that, which way we want to go?
Angela Singh with the Tourism Office.
Good afternoon, Charlie Newell, I'm a part-time professor at American Farm University System.
Hunter Joslin, Inville Board Balance Trainer.
I'm Ryan Hayden, I'm with the Tourism Office.
Deborah Webster, Tourism Office.
Gina Parrish, Delaware North Parks and Resorts out of Kennedy Space Center.
Ray Walton, old, retired.
Lori Thompson, co-owner Dixie Crossroads Seafood Restaurant.
So with the Tourism Development Office.
And I'd like to also make a motion that we can include and allow a voting member, Dr. Dwayne DeFries. Maybe you can introduce yourself as well. I just introduce yourself first, and then we can do the motion.
Good afternoon, everybody. Dwayne DeFries. I'm the Executive Director of the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program.
Great, thank you. Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we allow Dr. DeFries to participate in the meeting via telephone.
Motion by Ms. Thompson,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Jocelyn. All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. Okay. Peter, did you want to do the microphone?
Cover that for everybody. I think that's pretty straightforward.
I'll just go over a few housekeeping items, and you all did excellent. You already passed the microphone test. We do have a new system in here, and the microphones do help us help both people on Zoom hear what we have to say, but also help us record the minutes for the meeting. So if you can get in the habit of stating your name prior to speaking, then that helps us too with the minutes to know who is saying what on the recording. So that is very helpful. And then I think you're all kind of working ahead too on this, which is excellent. We have the potential conflict disclosure form in front of you. And if you could please fill that out and make sure that you give the copy to me prior to leaving today, that would be super helpful. So thank you for that. And again, maybe back to the microphones, just continuing with using Robert's Rules of Order throughout the meeting. That way you're recognized by the chair when you speak and state your name, and along with the motions and those type of items, we get a good record of the meeting. Having gone through all that, I think you all know where the bathrooms are, but if you don't, you're going to head straight down this hallway, take a left. They are locked, but there's a code right above the lock. So you can allow yourself in with that code. I think that should cover everything.
Great. Thank you. And also we had Mr. Williamson just join us. If you want to say hello, my name is Matt Boucher over the chair.
And I'm Williamson with Ocean Partners Hospitality, owners and operators of several hotels and companies.
Great, thank you, sir. Okay, can we get a motion for approval of minutes? Minutes last meeting. Motion to approve the minutes. Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Jocelyn to approve last meeting. Seconded by Ms. Thompson. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next item up for business is the selection of a vice chair. Oh, did anybody have a conflict of interest on the form
Oh, actually,
with today's agenda? Anybody have a conflict of interest on today's agenda? All members say no.
No.
So next would be the selection of the vice chair. Can we open that up for discussion? Oh, I thought we did that. Yeah. So selection of vice chair. Open up for somebody making a recommendation. I can make one if needed.
I nominate Laura Thompson.
We have a motion by Dr. Walton for Ms. Thompson for vice chair.
I'll second.
We have a second by Mr. Williamson. All in favor, or would like any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes. Congratulations, Ms. Thompson, for vice chair. Gotcha. And another housekeeping, I think I approved the minutes, right? Yeah, they approved. Yeah, so this is, okay. So let me back up a little bit, and we need to approve the agenda that we have in front of us today. So if I could get a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Dr. Walton, made a motion to approve the agenda. Seconded by Mr. Williamson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So that is covered. Okay. So now we are beach update by Mr. Mike McGarry. Are you ready, Mike? Or? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess to get it on the record, go up here. Is there a clicker? I'll just signal you.
Nope. Yeah, I can do it for you.
So I'm Mike McGarry. I've met most of you, but a couple of new folks. So thank you for having me. I work in the Brevard County's Natural Resource Management Department and manage the beach projects, which are funded. The heart of this committee's intent is to take care of our beaches, and I manage those projects on behalf of the county and also seek outside funding and partnerships for those projects. Many of you have seen this map before, but for the sake of some new members, I wanted to sort of review the geography, and I added a couple of new numbers which you old timers can try to pick out, but I'll go just from north to south for tradition. The Sand Bypass Project is actually a project by the Canaveral Harbor Port Authority. They are the local sponsor. So Brevard County doesn't pay for that. The Army Corps does the work. The port is the local sponsor, but they put a lot of sand on the beach south of the jetties at Port Canaveral. That project picks up sand from the shoreline immediately north of the port and brings it to the south side of the port to sort of mimic the natural sand transport that should be happening along that shoreline. And I like to tell people, while 30 years ago, the channel at the port, as managed by the Army Corps, was causing detrimental erosion to the downdrift beaches. But for the last couple of decades, with the Canaveral Port Authority pushing the Army Corps of Engineers in the right direction, that sand movement across the inlet has mitigated damage. So the inlet is no longer the bad guy because it's been properly managed. And I always feel it's important to let people know, that the Canaveral Port Authority has done their part to make that happen. The North Reach is our federal Army Corps project that goes from the jetties at Port Canaveral down to Patrick Air Force Base. And that was most recently nourished in 2020 and 2021. After this recent storm event, obviously the summer of 2022, Ian and Nicole did significant damage to our beaches. The North Reach is such a big, healthy project. The damages there were significant, but they weren't as severe to the, as threatening to the upland community. So there is a hurricane repair project in the planning phase for the Cocoa Beach, Cape Canaveral community. But it won't happen for about 2 years from now, 1.5 to 2 years from now. And that's so that the Army Corps can focus on projects in the mid-reach and south reach, which are more time sensitive. Then Patrick Air Force Base, they do beach nourishment also. It's funded by the Air Force. But they have elected sand as the best tool to protect their base assets in an environmentally sensitive, cost-effective manner. So they do beach nourishments to protect their base. And then we all know there's wonderful public beaches on the Air Force, or excuse me, Space Force Base. I should have retitled this. So we get great benefit from them maintaining their beach. They provide great beaches at those Space Force parks. The Mid-Reach is our federal project. It's the youngest of our Army Corps projects. It was built by the Army Corps of Engineers for the first time, finished in April 2020. So we worked for a long time to get that project designed, permitted, authorized by Congress. And the first project was completed in April of 2020. That project, the beach is narrow relative to the beach that we build in Cocoa Beach, and that's to minimize sand burial of the nearshore rock habitat in the Satellite Beach, Indian Harbor Beach area. If we built a big, giant, wide beach, it would bury too much of the rock reef habitat, and that would be undesirable for the environmental benefits of that rock. So the Mid-Reach is a more narrow project, which means it will have to be maintained more often. The Mid-Reach took some real dramatic damage in this past hurricane season. So on the books, the Corps is planning to advertise this summer a project to fully restore the Mid-Reach at a cost of approximately $56 million is their most recent cost estimate for that. Before the hurricanes, they were already planning to renourish the beach between November of 23 and April of 24, but it was going to be a smaller scale maintenance project, and the estimated cost was about $17 million, half of which would be paid by the federal government, and the remaining half, or just over $8 million, would be paid by the non-federal sponsor, Brevard County. Brevard County then seeks state grants, which typically pay us for about half of the non-federal share. But for that Mid-Reach project, we had already budgeted a net county cost of about $4 million for this fiscal year. And I'm confident the remainder of that $56 million will not require additional county cost share. But the Army Corps has not told us whether our commitment for a project that was going to cost on the order of $18 million, and we owed about half. We're not sure if we're off the hook for that expense that we were already going to pay even before the hurricane showed up, but we do stand to benefit from at least an extra $40 million of federal dollars that will not require additional match. So it's an enormous post-hurricane restoration. It's the worst that beach condition it's been in since the hurricane season of 2004. It really hammered that shoreline, similar to what it did in 2004. So thankfully, of the $56 million hurricane repair project, it shouldn't cost us any more than we have already budgeted this year, even before the hurricanes ever showed up. If we get lucky, we might be relieved of some of our initial responsibility, but that is not a sure thing. Then the South Reach. The Mid-Reach is Satellite Beach, Indian Harbor Beach, that area. The South Reach is Indian Atlantic and the town of Melbourne Beach. It's also an Army Corps project, been maintained several times. And a hurricane repair project is scheduled there to run in parallel with the Mid-Reach project. That South Reach project is budgeted at 17 million. And by leveraging our federal partnership, we expect that 17 million should not require any additional local match. So that is in part why the great benefit we get from these Army Corps projects. On a normal year, we pay our fair share, but often after emergencies, we get storm repair projects with no local cost. So that South Reach project at 17 million, the Corps will bid that also this summer. The South Reach and the Mid Reach are being built, contracted as one project because they're adjacent to each other, and the Corps can improve efficiency by contracting both of them together. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the North Reach will happen a year behind the start of the Mid Reach and South Reach. And that's just because the Corps only had so much staff. They couldn't handle it all. So they're handling the Mid Reach and South Reach where the beaches are in more dire condition. Finally, in the South beaches at the very south end of the county, this is roughly the southern 14 miles of the county. It's also an area that includes the Archie Carr National Wildlife Refuge, which is where our world-renowned sea turtle nesting. All of Brevard has great sea turtle nesting, but in the southern area of the Archie Carr Refuge, the nesting numbers are even better than elsewhere. So down there, we've done historically a dune maintenance project, an engineered dune project. It's a smaller project, and it was constructed initially as a smaller project and maintained sense because to do a full-scale nourishment on that 14 miles, there just was not sufficient funding available in the beach improvement fund. So for the last going on 20 years now, ever since we initially constructed it in early 2005, we've been doing this engineered dune project and getting, it's not an Army Corps project, but we do get considerable state funding. And also after declared emergencies, we often get FEMA funding. So this year, work began in January and is underway, and $26 million of restoration work is underway in the South Beaches area. Initially, all that money has to come out of the county coffers, so the bulk of it is out of the Beach Committee's Beach Improvement Fund. We do anticipate FEMA reimbursement for the bulk of that work, but it takes a couple of years before our reimbursement arrives. So that, leaves us in a tight financial spot that the county commission with guidance and help from Peter have been working on. Okay. So why do we do this? Why do we spend all this money? I wanted to show some success stories. And it's good, I think, to remind us all, this is the Breakers condominium in the town of Melbourne Beach. The picture on the left is before we ever had a federal shore protection project. The building was about to be undermined and fall on the beach. The residents were seeking a seawall, which of course isn't bad to protect their building, but it's horrible for the public beach. Then we built a beach nourishment project. The picture in the middle is 10 years after the nourishment project. A natural dune developed. We gave the system a bunch of sand. A natural dune developed. It's a beautiful site. And whether you're a tourist or a turtle, you would like to see that center picture relative to the one on the left when it was so critically eroded. And then just as important, the one on the right, which is after Hurricanes Ian and Nicole. So this was taken in January of 23 after we got hammered last hurricane season. And even though we lost a lot of sand from the beach, you could see that's the exact same spot, the dune in front of those Breakers condo building. The dunes are still there. The beach did its job, the dunes are there, they took a licking, we'll replace some sand in the coming year, but it really shows the projects did what they were intended. They protect the upland property and infrastructure, and they left us, even after a hurricane, with a pretty nice looking dune and beach system. This is another one some of you have seen before, but it's the Cocoa Beach Pier. You may have to squint because they're getting small the more years I try to squeeze in there, but the top photo is before we ever built the North Reach project. If you notice the top photo, the pier, the restaurant building, how far out into the water it is. If you look, the waves are going right up to the dune in that top photo. Then the second photo down is 2001, the year after the beach was built. Then you can see in 2021, okay, beautiful beach, lots of tourist chairs, volleyball courts. The volleyball courts and tourist chairs are all in areas that would have been underwater in the year 2000. But just as importantly, down at the bottom, 2022, after Ian and Nicole, the beach got whittled back a little, but there's still a healthy beach there. And it's because we've given that system adequate sand to bounce back. So the beaches took a hit, but they're still in pretty good shape considering the hurricanes we got. And this is just one more to show the old days in Cocoa Beach when the water went almost all the way up to the riprap and seawalls. The top one is 1995. The bottom one is 15 years later. We had built the beach project. That's the same condominium. So instead of having waves rolling up to the seawall and rocks are buried. You got a nice dune. So keeps the turtles and the birds happy and the tourists as well. Okay, now this map's back again just to illustrate. I'm about to go into the South Beaches area. So this is the southern 14 miles of the county. We're in the midst of a $26 million dune restoration project it'll stop April 30th this year, and I'll have to finish it after turtle nesting season. It's so big we couldn't get it all finished this year. But we're talking about that south boundary of the county, which is also the Archie Carr Refuge. And just this shows the extent of erosion after the storm. That's a little hotel in the South Beaches. That seawall was largely covered by sand. That hotel had sand under it and sea oats growing east of it, and it really shows the extent of erosion in the South Beaches. And while the development down there is not as intensive, there are a number of small mom and pop hotels. This is another small hotel, and many Airbnb type VRBO rentals going on down there. So even though it's not the extent of tourism we see in Cocoa Beach or in the Atlantic, there are a lot of visitors that use that beach. So that pool, thankfully, the owner of the property, thankfully from my perspective, the owner of the property has decided to give up on the pool. They're saving the building. So that there reaches a point when you really don't want a swimming pool on the crest of the dune. That thing was probably built 50 years ago, I'm speculating, but it was built in the old days. So the owner has decided to remove the pool, which is better for the dune system, but they'll still have a lovely little hotel with beach access and a nice patio. This is a vacation rental property also in the South Beaches, a couple miles south of those hotels. And this just shows before the storm, this place had 15 feet of patio deck east of it and a vegetated slope outside of that. So again, it's just the extent of erosion in the area. And one last one, this is just a private home, but it was also undermined, and there was some cracking to the foundation on this one. So in this case, the owner elected to have the home demolished. They were going to sell anyway, so they decided they would let the insurance company help them, get the value of the structure and just sell the lot. And it was unfortunate for them, but I think it was a good decision in the long run, and getting it the structure off the dune is sort of beneficial for long-term coastal management. So again, it was not your average year. This is as much erosion as we've seen since the 2004 hurricane season. And the 2004 season was also a combination of 3 hurricanes, Charlie, Francis, Jean. So the first one whittled the beaches down a little. The second one whittles it more, but when you get multiple storms, the beaches are worn down from the early storms, and it makes them more vulnerable to the final knockout punch of the season. One more hotel in the South Beaches, and I put a few numbers here. This one used to be called the Sandy Shoes. They've since renamed it something else, but it's a small hotel, been there forever, had a long-standing reputation. And they used to have a dune east of that building, but this was a big one. And here I just remind you that to fix the dune in this whole 14-mile area, which includes planting dune vegetation on the dune, which is required by our permits, but it also just makes good sense. And then all the associated engineering and environmental monitoring costs, it's going to be on the order of $26 million. We anticipate FEMA reimbursement of 87.5%. That leaves Brevard County obligated for about $3.3 million. But we've started, the state legislature has some hurricane response money, and we're already in line. So of our 3.3 million local portion, I would anticipate getting in excess of 2.5 million reimbursed by the state. So we should be in for less than $1 million on this $26 million project. The challenging part is the 87.5% from FEMA may not show up for 3 years or so. We always work the system as quickly as we can, but it's a long process. So we've been successful with FEMA in the past, but you do have to wait for the reimbursement. And that's why, with help from this committee and the TDC and the county commission, we've always tried to keep beach money in reserves, so we had money to front the cash for these projects until reimbursement came to light. So this is what we're doing. So at the top left, the dump truck placing sand down there. This is in the South Beaches. Then the bulldozer top right, there's a bulldozer sort of roughing it into place. Then the excavator goes in and tidies up around the beach stairs. And a week or so later, it looks like the bottom right, which is a nice dune slope that a turtle will be happy with. We do plan to vegetate it, but it won't happen until next year. It just wasn't possible to get sand and vegetation this year. But that's sort of a 4-photo summary of what we're up to in the South Beaches. And the contractor is working diligently. We have to be finished by April 30th in the South Beaches. Okay, this is the mid-reach. Again, the Corps is working to bid a project this summer, award the work roughly September of 23, and then work on the beach will happen starting November of 2023. And in combination with the South Reach, together the two projects, 56 million for the mid-reach and 17 million for the South Reach. And our indication at this point as the local share for the $73 million worth of work, the non-federal share at this point will be no more than 8 million, and half of that will be reimbursed by the state. So of the 73 million at this point, I think Brevard County will in the end pay no more than 4 million for this project. And we'll work to get that cost share even better. Okay, just to show you, this is the mid-reach post Nicole. So that's in Satellite Beach. That's one home that, just shows drama. And yes, that home was in a perfect world. It wouldn't have been built quite so close to the ocean, but it's been there. It's part of our community, and the neighborhood street is also just 15 feet behind it. So we're doing our part, not just to provide a tourist beach, But in the case of the Army Corps of Engineers, they're doing it to protect the upland infrastructure as well. This is also the mid-reach, further north, almost to Patrick Space Force Base, just an idea of the extent of erosion. That piece of concrete on the bottom left was the end of the sidewalk, which used to end about 15 feet from the edge of the dune that led people to the beach stairs. So that's what that was next. This is a more modern building in the city of Satellite Beach. You may have seen this one in the paper. I think everyone with hindsight will say they never should have built it there, but the state and the city let them. So it's just and they used to have considerable dune east of the building. That condominium association has bought some of their own sand to protect themselves for the next year or so until the government-funded large beach project comes in. But just an example of the extent of erosion in the mid-reach.
Where is that?
Straight across the street from the Publix in Indy Atlantic, next to RC's Surf Break.
I thought I read Satellite.
Oh, yes, yes, Satellite Beach, excuse me. I don't know how that town came out of my mouth.
I knew what you meant.
It's yeah, and right next to RC Surf Break, which is a popular break just on the north side of this property. And this is too small for any of us to really see, but it's just the extent. I just wanted to share, we have spent, if my eyes can see it right, before all this hurricane response, $235 million over the last 20 years or 22 years. But the TDC share, the county share, after we got all our state funding and federal funding and emergency funding, we've paid about 25 million of that 235 million. And that it's due to a lot of work, leveraging grants, leveraging emergency response. Our normal ballpark cost share for these beach projects with the Army Corps is the feds pay about 50%, and then we split the remaining 50% with the state, which leaves Brevard County paying about 25% of the normal project cost, and the state reimburses us for 25%. So that's in a normal year, and we have years that's where we pay, but then after emergency events, we leverage. Often the state legislature is a little more generous and provides extra state funding, and the same is true with Congress. So that's how we've managed to keep our long-term cost share for beach projects on the order of 11%, even though the contract cost share, if you look at it, would lead you to believe on a normal maintenance event, we pay about 25%, which still isn't a bad cost share ratio. But all of these projects, we do have to have funding available. So in order to get the Army Corps emergency money, we have to have committed to the Army Corps that when it's time for the ongoing maintenance of the project, we will have our local or our non-federal cost share as how they describe it. And the county commission has committed that to the Army Corps through long-term partnership agreements. And this committee and the TDC, have provided guidance to the county commission, who've done a good job of assuring the beach funds remain available, for the federal projects when the need arises. So I think you could go one more, skip the next one. You can skip that. And this is just sort of, you've seen this before, but for those of you who haven't, those people you may have seen last summer, Daytona Beach Shores, all their seawalls collapsing, and it's because they never gave them a beach. It's hard for even the strongest seawall to win the battle if there's no beach for the waves to break against. So this is just one that illustrates to me our work in beach management has paid off well, and I will leave it at that unless y'all have questions.
I've actually got a question. Talk about the southern flow of sand from the North Reach. Is that true all the way down? Or is it just because of that horn or?
Generally speaking, sand does work from north to south down the east coast. As you get into South Florida, the flow gets less clear. It sort of, there's more clear flow in North Carolina, for example, than there is in Florida. But it does happen throughout the county. What's unusual to know is in the summer, sand is moving from south to north. In the winter, it's moving from north to south. The net transport, though, is slightly to the south.
Glenn has a question on Zoom.
I'm ready, Elaine.
Dr. DeFreeze, do you have a question?
Yeah, first, Mike, I just want to thank you for your dedicated and great work over the many years. I know how busy your world gets in these post-storm recovery and response. I've got one question. When we've got homeowners demolishing homes, taking insurance, and then having, vacant property that I'm assuming they're putting back into the private real estate market, is there any interest at the state level with Division of State Lands to go ahead and acquire those properties for, market value and put them into public use?
I'm not aware of absolute interest in state lands, and the land acquisition process has not been my focus, Dwayne. So that I know the EELS program has purchased land in the past, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has acquired some land in recent years in an effort to protect some wildland down there for nesting turtles. I did ask the Department of Environmental Protection if, as part of this hurricane response, they could assist with the home being demolished or potential acquisition. I was thinking for it, construction access to get sand to the beach is limited, and every lot that gets built means it's one I can't cut through with a dump truck. So I was looking from that angle, but to my knowledge, the state is not seeking that, and it would require a request from the county, and I'm not sure what level of political support we have in the county for additional land acquisition.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Dr. Walton.
You probably ran it's gone out higher and deeper. Mike, I noticed in several of the pictures that you showed from the South Ridges that there were destroyed septic systems there. You had corrugated pipe and gravel and septic systems. Are those people, I don't think those people are going to be allowed to rebuild those homes because of the setbacks now required for septic systems down there. And now that DEP has taken over what used to be DOH for permitting, have you asked anybody about that at our local EHS office?
I begged and pleaded that the health department work with those people to get their systems active and repaired, and I don't think it happened. But to my knowledge, the Department of I asked, there's one home I said, they're in the home, the septic system's gone, the stuff's going somewhere, and they said, well, we can't force them out of the home, we can't force them to repair it. So I don't think the Department of Health is doing anything about it, is my frank answer. And I tried for a month after the hurricane, and then I just had bigger battles.
So that's now, DEP has taken over everything that DOH formerly did. So it's now a DEP.
Yeah. And
Okay.
I have to pick my battles. I'm usually the good guy trying to fix the beach, and
Yeah, I get it.
I think the owners did repair the systems. They just did it without a permit wherever the devil they could get away with it.
Mr. Benuto?
Mike, when you're showing your map, went up to Cape Canaveral, But what's going on or what happened at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station and Kennedy beaches? How did they fare during the hurricanes and how were they impacting our beaches down south of that?
They did see significant erosion after the hurricanes, and I know some of the Canaveral National Seashore, some of their beaches were closed. Just this morning, I had visitors from the Army Corps of Engineers here visiting our project, and they had mentioned NASA had contacted the Army Corps about doing a beach renourishment on the north side of the Cape to protect the launch facilities. NASA's been doing, well, I say NASA, in many cases it's the Air Force, but the federal agencies out there have done some large dune projects to protect launch assets. And they've talked about building a proper beach project and had it designed and partly permitted, but they never pulled the trigger, and perhaps this year they will. They're not impacting our beaches to the south because all the sand that washes off their beach ends up at the North Jetty at Port Canaveral, and then the sand bypass project scoops it up and moves it to the south. So they're not detrimentally impacting our beaches, but as federal agencies, they are actively considering using additional sand to protect their assets.
Mr. Williamson?
I always like to take the opportunity, like Dr. DeVries does, to try to praise Mike, and we're gonna do it again. And yes, we're forward looking with 25% of our PVC tax going to the beach. And with the county being forward looking, but the reason that our photos look so much better than the other areas around the state is like that right there. He works so well with the state and the feds and our Army Corps of Engineers that we wouldn't have the beaches that we have if we weren't.
I agree.
Well, thank you, Tom, but I do it with a lot of help from coworkers and partners like those in the room.
Mr. Williamson?
So do we push the button to turn our mics on?
Yeah,
Okay.
green is on.
Okay, that part didn't.
Sorry.
All right, so, where, the place where we're getting the sand from, I guess it's like a giant borrow pit out in the ocean. Are we taking it off Canaveral Shoals or further offshore?
Our South Beaches project, the sand is coming from inland quarries west of Fort Pierce and Vero Beach. So that's inland sand for the truck haul dune project in the south end. The Army Corps projects, the sand that's coming from an area we call Canaveral Shoals 2. It's about 5 miles offshore of Port Canaveral and just a hair to the north of the inlet at Port Canaveral. It's about 5 miles out, and we call it Canaveral Shoals 2 because that's the second area we got permitted, but it is part of the larger Canaveral Shoals system.
So, how long can we take sand out of there? Is it being replenished by the southern movement of sand, or is it too far offshore? I mean, how much longer can we keep pulling sand out of there?
It is, based on our surveys, it is not being replenished very fast. It's an extremely large reservoir, so we have decades of continued sand available out there, but you're right, it's in such deep water. It's in about 35 to 55 feet of water, so that the waves aren't moving much sand around on the bottom out there. So eventually we may have to look elsewhere, and for cost efficiency, I've been encouraging state and federal agencies, because I don't want to pay for it ourselves yet, to try to find another shoal off South Brevard, which would save a lot of money when we were building our projects in the Indian Atlantic area. But it won't last forever, but we're good for a couple more decades anyway.
Anybody else? Mike, I think that's the second time I've heard that presentation, and I got more stuff out of that. I could probably hear it again. Decipher a little bit more. I think I could probably say on behalf of all the board members, thank you for coming to the meeting, and obviously, you returning would be important as well. And we hope to have you back. So
Yeah, well, I do my best to be here, and if any of you have questions, you can follow them through Peter in the tourism office, but I'm happy to answer questions if you have them. Next week, if something comes to mind, I'll answer it.
great, thank you very much. I think we had a couple of board members join us during the presentation. Maybe you could have somebody, no, okay. That's what I thought.
Trying to keep a low profile.
Yeah. Matt Boucher, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Okay, next we have guidelines.
Actually, section 3 would be there, but that's okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So just to tie into what Mike was saying, it's a little bit of history on how TDT plays in all of this. When the Brevard County ordinance that dictates how tourist development tax is spent was created. The way it breaks down is there's 5 pennies, so 5% tax. Each penny kind of gets allocated differently. The first 2 pennies, 30% of that goes to beach. And then the third penny, 65% goes to beach. It comes out to be 25% of the total 5%. So that's the easy way that I remember it, is it's 25% of the total. So if we collect 20 million in a year, then a fourth of that, 5 million is going to go to the beach fund. So that's kind of how it breaks down. Share a few things. In 2018, there was a change. I think actually it goes back to 2017. There was a change to the state statute that allowed beach funds to be utilized for inland waterways. And in 2018, the Brevard County ordinance was changed to allow for a grant program for Indian River Lagoon grant, Indian River Lagoon projects that could receive grants up to $1 million. So that started it was changed in 2018, and then this committee opined in 18-19 on a number of grant projects and awarded that year just under 325,000 of the million. So they didn't use all the million. Then in 2019, 2020, we got more projects came in, more grant applications came in, and there was over 553,000 awarded. Then we had COVID in 2021, so we didn't do grants that year because obviously our tourist development tax went way down. But then back in 21, 22, we came back and we had even more interest in getting projects, and 825,000 out of the million was awarded. And then last year, for the first time, the entire $1 million was utilized. So we got enough projects to award the full million. So over the course of since the 18-19 budget year, almost $2.75 million has been awarded for this grant program. At the last TDC meeting, Mike has been coming pretty consistently since the hurricanes hit and kind of giving us updates. One of the things that's happening was all of the money that this year was sitting in our contingent fund, which is about $10 million sitting in contingency, as well as any dollars that were not allocated to some of those predetermined projects that Mike talked about, like in the mid-reach. Anything that was not specifically allocated is going to be utilized for that South Beaches project. So I think it came out to be about 17 million of that $26 million project. And then we needed more funds, so the county commission late last year agreed to let us access some remaining ARPA funds that existed from the COVID era. I think there was about $8.5 million available. We tapped about 6.4 million of that. So what essentially was going to happen is we're going to zero out our beach budget this year with no contingency left over. And as we go into next year, you know, as Mike said, not all of the projects going to get done this year, so we're going to need some more funds for next year. So, you know, depending on where we land with TDT, we've been fortunate. TDT's been growing pretty well, but it's still not going to be enough. So the TDC discussed this at the last meeting in February, and motion was made and accepted by the TDC to make a recommendation to the board to delay or basically suspend our 23-24 budgeted grant program. That went before the board on March 6th, and the board had a lot of discussion about it. As you can imagine, I would recommend, if anybody's not seen that discussion that's here today, I'd recommend going back and taking a look at it. There were a lot of recommendations, everything from keep the suspension in place until there are no named storms. And then if by September of 2024, there were no named storms, then we go ahead and allocate those funds. Another suggestion was suspend the grant program for next year and then make it up over the following 10 years. So instead of $1 million a year, create a $1.1 million a year fund for the next 10 years, which that would cause a change in the ordinance would have to happen, but that's always possible. And then a third option was to take those funds from the cultural fund and actually either borrow, take, or reallocate based on a lot of different factors. So at the end of the discussion, it was decided that should go back to the TDC and one more time and have another discussion and have the TDC make a recommendation. So we've got a meeting next Wednesday, it's the 22nd. So that conversation will take place, and then that's supposed to be brought back to the board on April 4th. So that'll be obviously that's impacts this committee quite a bit, because we'd like you to go ahead today and move forward with opining on the grant guidelines and all of that, so it's in place. But either we may have a delay, we may have to find the money from another fund, so we don't know yet exactly how that's going to play out, but I wanted you to be aware of that. The other thing that occurred during that meeting, where there were 9 grants from last year that grant recipients that came to us and were asking for a little bit more time to do their projects. So that was granted. We're giving them till September of 24 to finish any projects that would be started this year. So I think one of the things we'll get into the guidelines is a lot of these projects do take a little bit longer than a year. So we might as well just put it right into the guidelines to give them 2 years to do it, with the flexibility of maybe adding like a 1-year extension that this office could grant. And so that's going to be something that we'll recommend when we get into that. So I think that was all the information I needed to share, just to give you a little bit of that background and history. But we've had 29 over the years. We've had 29 different recipients receiving about $2.75 million of these kind of allocated beach fund for IRL projects. So it's some of those are very good projects. There's a lot of learning. There's smaller projects. They tend to be less than $250,000. Whereas if anybody knows about the bigger projects that Sorrel and the halfpenny tax that's administered by the Natural Resources Department manages, I mean, they're talking about $500 million being collected over a 10-year period. And those are much, much bigger projects, a lot of septic to sewer, all kinds of different infrastructural type of projects that happen with that. So the projects that come here tend to be a little bit of a smaller scale and something that could be doable in a shorter period of time. So with that, Mr. Chair, unless there's any questions, that was my piece.
So,
Go ahead,
so
Mr. Williamson.
is the TDC going to be looking to us for recommendation on what to do with this grant money?
Because it went to the board and the board asked that it go back to the TDC, there wasn't a chance to, have the TDC make a request, a formal request. Obviously, if this committee has thoughts or ideas or input, those can certainly be discussed and they can be brought to the TDC meeting next week. We can share any ideas that might be the committee may have. The three ideas that I had discussed were three ideas that were brought up by board members. So that's why I brought those up, because those were specifically brought up by board members, but there may be other options as well, but certainly the committee is welcome to give any thoughts that they might have.
Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. I've been told that there's 80, I don't know the exact number, but I've been told there's 80 derelict vessels in the Indian River. So we were still trying to get rid of vessels from Irma, when the two hurricanes hit this year. So if we, I understand, that was part of the deal when we set this program up, was that if money was needed for beach restoration, that we would not do it that year. So I get it. I understand. I was there when we did that. But how can we keep the derelict vessels removal going?
Where are you at? Would you explain a little bit or a little more general for
Sure.
if I understand?
So every year since we initiated this program in 2018, 2019, the county has applied for $49,999 for derelict vessel removal. So all those sunken boats that you see all around the river, that was part of the money that the county was using to pull those boats out of the water. And I would hate to see any progress that we're making on getting these eyesores and dangerous things out of the river. I would hate to see that slowed down.
I wanted to thank Mr. Chair, if I may, I just wanted to mention, so last year they applied for that grant that you mentioned again, and then we had remaining funds. If you were just suppose that we're sitting on this committee last year, might recall, they came back and basically said, if there are any remaining funds that are available, could we have access to them, because we do have all these vessels in. And so last year they were awarded almost 147,000. So they're still working through those funds. They have not burned through all those funds yet. Mike may know a little bit about where they are with the number, because I don't know the total number of vessels versus how many they've removed. I don't have those statistics on me, but I know they've made them slow but steady progress with that.
And I do not have the numbers specifically for number of boats removed. I know Matt Culver, who works in my office, manages this work. And you're right, there is always need for derelict vessel funding. I did want to share getting law enforcement clearance always takes time, and Matt is working to use state funds before he uses the local funds. And I wanted to share the good news that after Hurricane Ian and Nicole, the state legislature funded the Florida Fish and Wildlife to remove hurricane vessels. So just a couple weeks ago, Matt at my office, the state is so busy doing the West Coast stuff that they just are assigning the money to Matt at my office to get it done. So most the hurricane vessels from Ian and Nicole are being fully funded by the state and the work executed through the Natural Resource Management Office. I know like I said, a couple weeks ago, Matt got a contract approved for 12 boats that were associated with Ian, and they're working on a bigger list for Nicole. So I can't tell you exactly how much of the previous money has been spent, but I will say state funding is covering the bulk of the damage from Hurricane Nicole and all those extra boats.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I would just like to address that question Laura came up with. Just in the last 2 weeks, maybe 3, I've seen 2, maybe 3 sailboats yanked off the bottom near 99 Marina, which is right near my house. So it's an ongoing process. So they haven't stopped.
Great. Anybody else have any discussion on that? We're gonna move into the actual motions for each of the action items, or each of the guidelines. So I guess we'll probably open up the first one for discussion. On the first action item number 1. We open it up. Yeah, of course. Angela, like to give some background on that.
Let's give you a really brief background. As you all know better than I, you've gone through these guidelines every year and modified them as you see fit and needed. And this year it's just a little bit different. So we have a all department effort to make the guidelines more thorough so that the contracts can be a little simpler. So when we enter into the contract with your grant recipients that you have chosen, they can be a little bit simpler and just refer back to these guidelines. So this year you are seeing a few changes that make them more robust. And the reason why I went through and kind of highlighted a lot of the areas in gray that we can discuss. The areas that have not been highlighted have either been edited and or recommended by our county attorney's office to be utilized. And so obviously we can discuss them if needed, but those areas are somewhat off the table for discussion. But the great thing that this also does is we are also working on an effort to make the guidelines more similar as in a format standpoint with the other committees. So the cultural committee had their meeting last week. Our guidelines reflect the same template, if you will, as the cultural, and then the sports and capital guidelines will also represent what we are doing here in Beach too. So we're making them a little more homogeneous with the other committees. And knowing that we found it best to work through section by section. So Chair, if you want to take it from there.
So we'll start with guideline number 1. Open for discussion. Any comment, Ms. Thompson?
No, I just want to compliment you for your work on this, you know, going back to the days of me and Deborah eating cold pizza in a closet in the office, working on grant guidelines. This is a huge improvement, and I congratulate you. I'm really glad to see that you've got living shorelines stated there, and this is a great improvement, and I like it, and thank you.
Could we take that as a motion to approve?
Well, absolutely, yes. I move that we approve all of the suggested changes in 1.0 introduction and background.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Williamson. All approved?
Before we vote.
Yes.
So on the scope of our projects, what does that entail? I mean, is it the watershed of the lagoon? Does that include anything on the dunes? Can we define that a little bit better? geographically, or like I said, for the watershed?
Ms. Angela?
So the way I understand it, is that in the past, we did have a map in here that showed the Indian River Lagoon area and then requiring all the projects to be in the area of the map. With this current, proposal before you, that map has been removed, does not mean we cannot add it back. So I think that's a great comment, is really either outlining the area or defining the scope of what you see as a committee that you think should be included.
What kind of got me to ask that question is last year there was a proposal and it didn't go through because they apparently didn't set the guideline. And that was to nourish an area in Satellite Beach that could serve as a nesting area for these terns, which are species of concern. And the applicants in Satellite Beach were told it didn't fit because I guess it didn't map at the time, but it certainly would trigger some of these things like the fish and wildlife recovery and stocking. I just kind of wanted to clarify that, if that project comes back.
But that was beachside.
It's on the beach.
That was on the beach. That wasn't in the Indian River Lagoon.
Yeah, I know, but if I'm looking at this, I mean, that's part of the watershed, right?
Well, no, and water goes that way.
It depends what type of dune you're on.
I don't know. I think we get into the beach stuff, we're gonna have a world of hurt. We're gonna have everybody in the world coming down trying to say, fix my dune, get my birds,
Ms. Thompson?
bring the
you
map
have-
back.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think we should bring the map back. It's pretty simple. If your star doesn't fit in that map, he's not eligible.
Well, I mean, we should make it easier for the applicant.
So, maybe a motion to bring the map back, or, we got any discussion on that?
So,
Make the motion, Johnny. 'Cause you gotta do
It is,
Yeah, so make a motion to bring the map back or perhaps update it, better, make sure it reflects all the ideas and requirements that are embedded into the introduction and background.
That's good.
we have a second on that?
I'll second.
Just a point of
it.
order.
We already had a motion.
We have a motion.
So,
There's a motion that was on the table that was seconded. And Mr. Venuto's comments, I believe, with respect that you know very well how this works forward. I believe that's an addition or an addendum to the existing motion.
Okay. so can we get a motion to add Mr. Venuto's,
Who made the motion?
Ms. Thompson?
So Laura
I
Williams
accept-
has to
I
agree to
accept
accept
Yes.
his addition.
So Ms. Thompson accepts the addition of the updated map, bring it back. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So that's good, okay. Are there any opposed to that? I should probably do that in the future. So we're moving along to number 2, section 4.
If everyone's, I guess, if everyone's okay skipping section 2 and 3, then the next section would be section 4. And the change here is, what Peter had described is looking at making this a 2-year, grant period versus a 1-year grant period. However, the way it was written is if you decided to complete your project in 1 year, you would have the ability to do so. And then that which would, the way it's written right now, would then make you eligible to apply for grant funds in the following year. If you take 2 years to finish your grant, then you wouldn't be able to apply for funds until that 2-year cycle was over. So this first part here is a schedule, but it does probably merit the discussion of the length of the time of the grant.
Mr. Chair, just a comment. Yeah, the reason we added that part was we found that there were some organizations that were getting a little overzealous and were requesting funds for an additional project when they hadn't completed a project, or they were asking for an extension on a previous project. So this court sort of would keep them in corralled until they finished one project, and they can come back and ask for more. You know, one thing that could be added, or maybe added to the explanation, if anybody's interested in that, is you know, if there's enough staffing for an organization to handle multiple projects, a lot of the staffing, a lot of the organizations that apply are smaller organizations, and they do have staffing issues, and so that's the main reason for that.
Mr. Franz, Ms. Harris?
Yeah, I was gonna add on to that, when you're talking an educational, you know, entity. Is say, a Florida Tech or UCF, if they're getting one, you're not gonna prohibit another group at that educational, college to have applied for it too, correct?
Correct. The way it is written, it is actually by project. So if the school wanted to apply for two different projects, they would be able to do that. The same school could, or the same city could apply for two different projects, the way it's written right now.
Okay.
But again, that's.
I believe Dr. DeFries had a comment on Zoom.
Dr. DeFries?
I don't have a problem per se, but you know, because we run, you know, multiple contracts from the National Estuary Program, you know, if you set out a 2-year timeline, you should assume that almost every one of these projects is going to take the full 2 years to deliver. And so my question is, what happens if they come back and want an extension? Are you going to grant no cost extensions after 2? Are you going to hold them tight to scope of work? We're seeing this as a kind of a regular occurrence in our own program, these no cost extensions, and we are starting to really, you know, ratchet down what we'll allow and what we won't allow. Because the fact is, these entities make a proposal with a timeline. And so if you're going to go 2 years, I think in your contract and scope of work, there needs to be some pretty explicit language that you expect that project to be completed in 2 years, and no cost extensions are going to be really hard to get unless there's extenuating circumstances. So I think this is fine. And in fact, I think it will help a lot of our applicants. But I do think in your contracting and scope of work, there needs to be some very explicit language about what happens, because these are all small grants. 2 years is a long time to deliver. Even, you know, with all the issues we see. You need to be prepared in that contract so your grantees understand that, you know, they just can't assume they can go into year 3 with a no cost just because they didn't get the work done.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Kranz?
so yeah, actually the last sentence on page 4 of 4.0 gives me as the director the ability to grant a 1-year extension to the 2-year term. I will tell you that, you know, we don't need a contract for that to be denied. Nor would I need a contract to not renew it beyond that 1 year. So, you know, I think that the idea being, we're not going to have a detailed contract going forward because the guidelines are the contract. All we're going to have is a 1-page document that will basically name the organization, the amount of money that they were awarded, and they just sign off on it. And basically it says all of the terms and conditions of the contract are located in the grant application guidelines. So that's going to save the county attorney's office endless hours of review, Because it's all gonna be done up front, and it's all gonna be approved by the board up front.
Okay, Dr. Walton, ready?
So, Peter, at the end of page 4, where it says Director of GDO may grant a 1-year extension project for sufficient cost. Don't want to jump ahead, but in section 10 on page 9, item 3, it says, should a grant need to be extended, Director of Tourism Development Office has the authority to extend contract for an additional year, same thing. Applicants applying for an extension will not be able to submit other applications for the same or similar projects until the initial project is completed. So should that maybe go at, I mean, do we need that there, or should that just go on this page underneath that first sentence? Last, in section 4 where it says, I mean, you've got it twice there. Right. I mean, the only difference is applicants applying for an extension.
It's the pleasure of the committee.
Right.
Whatever the committee would like to do,
Right.
I'm happy either way.
Well, I think it's a great idea that you can't apply for another grant if you haven't finished the first one. I mean, that needs to be absolutely straightforward and clear. And it also says an applicant may not submit more than one application per project. So to your point earlier, if the application is UCF, we have to distinguish between environmental science department versus somebody else. Is that how that was? Sorry, didn't mean to confuse.
So that language you're saying should be added.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out if we need to put the number 3 under 10 in section 4,
A
or,
little bit more specific.
I mean, I don't care really. I just pointed out and saying how we address that.
Mr. Williamson.
I agree. I think we should put it in both places.
There's a solution.
Make a motion. You can make a motion to take the language from page 9 of section 3. That reads, applicants applying for an extension will not be able to submit other applications for the same or similar projects until the initial project is completed. Add that language to the bottom on page 4.
My motion, thank you.
And also to approve that action as well. The number 4 application process.
Yes.
Do you have a second?
I'll say.
We have a second by Ray. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Discussion?
Well, this is, this goes back to where, Peter said that no one would be able to apply for a new grant until their grant is finished. I guess that's covered by what we just did, you know, because you were saying that it would be a 2-year. I don't see any language in here that says that you can't apply for a new grant if you haven't completed it at the end of your 2 years, but I think it implies what we just did, that you can't apply for another grant until you finish the one you're on. So I think it's okay.
Well, that's what that says right there.
Yeah, he's just,
Yeah.
he's just bringing it up there.
So that was approved.
Project.
Can you apply for another project if you're still working on a grant? I
We
think that's what
just-
you said, that you can.
What we just approved was applicants applying for an extension will not be able to submit other applications for the same or similar projects until the initial project. Okay, so that's approved. Number 3, guideline number 5.0 on page 5. And we'll open it up for discussion. Ms. Henson, do you have anything to add?
So this is the same as last year, and maybe a question for Deborah, is this what the map lives?
No,
Okay.
the map actually lives on the application. So I think we're gonna get to the application further down the line, but in what happens is it's something that the applicant can download when they're working on the application. They can highlight the area on the map that the location is, and then they upload it. So it really has nothing to do with what we're talking about now.
Does anybody have any discussion on 5.0 eligibility? If not, can I get a motion to accept?
Make a motion to accept 5.0 as written.
And second,
I'll second.
and second by Ms. Parrish. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, page 6, guideline 7.0, eligible use of funds. I'll open that up for discussion.
It's available funds or
Eligible.
however we'll do it.
Assessing.
Yeah, I would just add that, you do all have a sheet at your seat, a single sheet that said, the top of it does say 7.0 eligible use of funds.
Yes. Actually, let me, make a note on that. Dr. Ray Walter has, put some time into it, and it looks like just from what I've read, cleaned it up, but, Dr. Walton, would you mind explaining to the committee members?
Those of you who've been around for a while know that we always have issues with this. It's kind of confusing, so this is just an attempt to make it really pretty simple. You know, we're not trying to explain space time here to people, so it was just an effort to make it really clear and easy to understand for the applicants. Last year, 60% of the applicants were unable to do the simple math to calculate how bonus points are determined and what their match actually was. So it's important for us to be able to make them aware of how they calculate the match. Sorry.
I appreciate it personally. It makes it real easy for me. So I would like to make a motion to accept Dr. Walters. What is that?
Edits.
Edits. As they are presented. Looking for a second if anybody is.
I'll second it.
Ms. Thompson seconds it. Anybody got any comments? Yes, sir.
I'm no real parliamentarian, but I don't think you as chair can make a motion.
We'll take that then.
You have to take your gavel and give it to the vice chair.
I think I got too excited with the edits, so I apologize. But
I'll make a motion.
there we go. Ms. Parrish made some motion to accept the edits.
Yes.
We have a second,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Thompson. All agreed? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And the edits pass. Okay. So we're going over to page 8, guideline number 9, evaluation criteria and approval process. Ms. Essen, if you give us-
This is, a lot of this is set, but what I did want to bring to your attention is we'll be looking at the score sheet next. And, if there are any changes made to the score sheet, then I would reflect it in the highlighted area of section 9 so that they are consistent. So I'm not sure if you want to have the discussion now about the number of points that are required. You can have that with the score sheet, and then just know that I will make sure this area matches that score sheet.
Okay, so duly noted, that if we do change the score sheet, we have to come back to this. So we can approve this, change right here, and then if we need to, come back.
I make a motion to approve this, so with the comments made by Ms. Etheling, that it will match the score sheet.
Mr. Walton has made a motion to approve guideline number 9. And we can readdress if we need to after we look at the score sheet. Can we hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Thompson. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, so that passes. Page 9, number 10, terms and grants. Do I hear a motion to accept the change? Ms. Thompson, do you have discussion?
Ron is gonna make a motion.
Right? So we have a
Have
motion.
discussion. So I move that we accept number one, applicant may not submit more than one application per project in section 10.0.
Second one.
And seconded by Ms. Parrish. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Same page, guideline number 11, reporting requirements. This, essay,
Yes, this is a change from last year's guidelines. We in the past have, you as a committee in the past have asked for 4 reports, 3 throughout the project and then a final report. They have been changed now to just a mid-project report and then a final report. So it's obviously the committee's pleasure.
discussion, or?
Yes, discussion. So with that, now with the 2-year time frame, is this gonna be bounded by specific time or when they reach 50% of project completion?
The way I understood it, it would be when they reach 50% of their project completion.
Mr. Chair, I just quick comment. Yeah, I think, one is these grants take a lot of time to administer. Even though it may not seem like it, there's a lot of work that goes on in our office to make sure that everybody's on track. And I think cutting it down to 2 reports kind of helps a little bit with the timing of that. Plus that first year, what we're finding is there's a lot of sort of get ready work that happens in the first year of these, particularly these grants. So there's not a lot of activity that happens maybe in the first 6 to 9 months. And it isn't until they get closer to the end of that first year that they're really moving forward on the activity. And then, if we wait till the midterm, if you will, at the end of that first year, I think we'll be able to get a pretty good project assessment, project report in that mid-year as well.
Here's kind of question. I know we don't have a great sample size, but have you seen any more projects or organizations that have received funding before? Do they get a second one? Are they a little more efficient in their process, or is it just too early in the process to make that determination?
I mean, I'm gonna look to Deborah, but I will give you my impression is they get more ambitious as they go. So usually what's happened is those first projects from a couple of years ago were sort of like test projects. They're trying to test something and see if they could prove or disprove a hypothesis. And then once they've done that, now they want to do more of that project. So it actually is taking on more. So the projects get bigger in scope as they've gone. And I think that's why we're up to $1 million, awarding the full $1 million is we're now getting people that have sort of gone through a couple of years of testing different things, and they sort of see where the traction is. And now they're putting a lot of energy and effort into bigger scope projects. Does that sound right?
I think twofold, exactly what Peter said, and then additionally, they've sat through these meetings, so now they're understanding the match better. So they're able to utilize matching funds and then also creating a bigger project with more efficiency.
Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. So, based on that, we do have some projects that have gotten bigger in scope and they've come back multiple years and applied. So when we go back to 10.0 terms and conditions, number 1, it says an applicant may not submit more than 1 application per project. So if they have, gotten a grant and two or 3 years have gone by and they completed part 1 of the grant, can they not come back and apply for additional funding for that same project?
Mr. Grandis?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think I think what the committee needs to decide is that, is that second phase or third phase of a project still part of the original project, or is it a new phase and you want the opportunity to review what they're doing and have this committee, sort of review an application for it so that you can really see what they're doing and make a determination as if it's worthy of additional funding. So that's one thing. What were you pointing to, Joe?
Chair,
Yes.
to answer, the question, I believe it's stated here, one application per project, but it comes down here, and we talk again about the initial project is completed. Applicants applying for an extension will not be able to submit other applications for the same or similar projects until the initial project is completed. That's a recurring theme that goes on, so it's not going to take away anything from anybody as long as they've completed the project. And Mr. Crane said, you could confirm if somebody were to have a 2-year project and literally finish it in 9 months, they could literally apply for the same project if it was completed. As long as it was completed, they could continue to move forward in the process. The time constraint doesn't exist.
Yeah, assuming the grant cycle resets, right? They can only do it once a year. We only have the grant once available once a year.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
yeah, so they could. But I think going to Laurel's question, it was more pointed about, I'm thinking of a project. Good one is Sampson Island, right? Satellite Beach. They came 2 years ago. They had a hypothesis, and when they wanted to test it, they wanted to see if it worked. They did a lot of work on the island. They were able to complete that. Then they came back the next year and said, hey, we want to expand this because it really worked out well. And then the committee got a chance to review it. They got a chance to look at the application and say, yes, this is worthy. And so they were granted, awarded the grant the second time around. If we didn't allow for that, you could almost take a project and just make it as long as you ever wanted it to be without ever coming back to the committee. And I feel like the committee really needs to determine, is this worthy of continuing? Is it worthy of additional funding? So I like the idea of you have to finish, put a pin in it, finish it, dot all your I's and cross your T's, come back to the committee with a new application for a second phase, a third phase, whatever that may be. It just seems like that's a better way to give the committee more control over those funds.
And that's what they did, phasing. They get phasing.
Ms. Thompson, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's good. It like clarifies the process. So like if you come in and the first time you apply, it's for a feasibility study. And then the next time it would be for construction plans. And the next time it would be for permitting. So you can break it up into sections like that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think it gives it some checks and balances.
Yeah.
Mr. Walton?
So the first sentence in section 11, reporting requirements, makes it easier for staff here and easier for the applicant. Increase their own time, effort, energy as well. I'd like to make a motion to approve it.
There's a motion on the table to approve guideline number 11 as it's written, making it easier for both staff and applicant. So do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Venuto. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? So that motion passes. Number 11, and I think we're on the page 19. Okay, so we're going to the scorecard on page 19. And we can open that up. This section would like to this little.
The only thing that has been changed on here are 2 items, and the first is the first gray box right under the title.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, just a point of order, because even though I know there were sections that the committee didn't weigh in on because they were determined by the county attorney's office, I think we need to do a quick vote to just accept all of the additional sections that were provided by the county attorney's office, just so we have that covered. that okay?
It's fine with me. Any discussion on that? So basically, the stuff that's not highlighted, was from the legal department. And Mr. Kranis has suggested that we accept that whole. Do you think maybe we should do that at the very end?
We can, and whatever your pleasure is, I just didn't want to forget it.
So why don't we do that at the end? After we do the scorecard, then we'll go back and kind of accept all those.
Right, the second box under, or the first box under the title where it says, request must achieve a minimum of 75% of the standard points to be considered for funding. When you go to, the last page, 23, sorry, it's kind of straddled on both pages there. I just spelled out what 75% of the 105 points were to make it a little clearer, because honestly, when I first pulled it up, it was a little bit confusing if it was 75% of the points with the bonus point. The way I read it was 75% of the points required before any bonus point. So I did alter that. If that was not accurate, we definitely would need to change that. And then the other items that, I guess that was it. That was all that I had changed on this one.
Mr. Chair, just I remember this was 2 years ago that the bonus points were added. In case somebody was able to come up with additional matching. I believe the intent of the committee at the time, obviously it's different, and it's new committee, but was to include those bonus points in the score, because it would help, it would be incentive to them for them to go out and find additional funding from other partners. So I guess I'll just throw that out as for the committee to determine, but I thought the original intent was that those bonus points would be included when you were calculating the full percentage.
Noted. Dr. Ray?
I do not believe that's correct. That is not what the intent was when it was done. We got to keep all of these people on the same page on 75% of the standard point, because we've overweighted. If you do the math, we've overweighted people who have to have a match. It's the difference between 5 bonus points, 10 bonus points, 4, 15, or 20.
Right.
So we're,
You're already giving them.
well, people who are already bringing money to the table to make an application if they're going to go over $50,000. Right? They're already bringing money to the table, so we've already overweighted them. So this was, Ms. Essing is absolutely right. It's 75% of 105 points.
Very good.
Okay,
Thank you.
should we put that, Angela, right there in the front, where it says requests must achieve a minimum of 75% of standard points to be considered for funding? The first question you're going to get is, oh, what are standard points? How many points do I have to get? So maybe we ought to just combine those two when you have it at the end and put in there, a request must achieve a minimum of 75%, and maybe in parentheses, 78.75%. Would it make it clear for the applicant? Just a suggestion.
I like that suggestion.
Should we make a motion? All right, I'll make a motion that we change that first gray box on page 19, that the request must achieve a minimum of 75%, parentheses, 78.75 points, close parentheses, of standard points to be considered for funding.
Okay, I think the motion is clear. Does anybody have any discussion?
I have
Discussion, Mr. Williamson?
I don't want to get too carried away here, but would it be more specific if we did say in that something like does not include matching funds or matching points or bonus points? So that perfectly clear on it.
Exclude bonus points.
So there's discussion right now, to maybe add language, is that what you're saying? To say, to exclude bonus points in the calculation. So do you want to add an addendum to your motion, Mr. Walton?
I would like to add that addendum to,
Okay.
the verbiage should state that it excludes bonus points in the calculation.
I don't think it's emotional with that stuff.
All right, so we'll just do, we're still in, discussion, Ms. Parrish.
Just a comment, when you look at the form, you might want to put where you have points available, put that as standard points, and then when you get down to the last box, put that as titled bonus points, so that when somebody's looking, they know if you're gonna call it standard points, that they know it's standard points. And then call the last 20 bonus points.
Section 4.
Yeah, the column. Standard points available and bonus points. And then that way it's clear.
So we have a motion on the table, Dr. Walton, you want to take the language from page 23, also add, am I correct? Or why don't you repeat your motion there?
Well, I'm trying to,
Just call that standard point.
yeah,
And then the last one call it bonus.
well,
Keep what you said though.
yeah, I don't know. I think points available is clear. I think what we might want to do is go to section 4 on page 23, project funding, when it says A, and I don't know why we have an A and not a B. Can you have an A without a B? I don't know. But where it says leveraging with matching funds bonus points, that's clearly says bonus point. Right? So that's the leveraging portion. I don't know, I just thought it was clear.
So what was your wording for bonus points in the initial?
The initial motion was that we simply change on the first page of the score sheet in that gray box where it says request must achieve a minimum of 75% of standard points to be considered for funding. The motion was originally request must achieve a minimum of 75% of standard points, parentheses, 78.75, close parentheses, to be considered for funding. Mr. Williamson would like to add excluding bonus points. So I think we can do that. Can you fill it in there?
So,
Yeah, and do the same thing on the final page, page 23, where it says maximum 105 standard points, parentheses 78.75, equals a qualifying score. You know, the whole point here is, well, if you don't make 75%, we're not going to consider your application. So that's the whole deal. It's an either or. You either make 75% or you don't. And it's all on bonus. It's all on standard points.
Bonus points excluded.
Right. So,
okay, so just to refresh, the motion on the table is request to add the verbiage on page 19, request must achieve a minimum of 75%, paren 78.5, 75, and paren of standard points to be considered for funding, excluding bonus points.
excluding bonus points, yeah.
So do we have a second for that? Does we understand everything?
I'll second.
Okay, a second by Mr. Smith. Any discussion, any additional discussion? All in favor of that verbiage, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? So that passes. Good. Is that all seven? Oh, yeah. So now would be the point, Mr. Kranis, to bring up that, motion for acceptance of go ahead, Deborah.
So on page 20, are we going to rename points available standard points or standard points available, or keeping it as points available? For that column. Columns.
Yeah, they're standard points until you get to that last section. Section 4 is only the bonus point.
Right. We need a motion to do that.
I don't think so. I think it's
Clear
clear.
the bonus point.
Yeah.
Okay.
You might want to get rid of the A.
Is that something?
How about I get rid of the A and make the bonus points a different color, that way it even looks different also.
Don't need a motion for that, do we? All right, so we need to accept the attorney's.
All other sections that the county attorney's office provided.
So would somebody please make a motion, Ms. Thompson, that we accept?
I make a motion that we accept all of the, additions that came from the county attorney's office.
Second that.
We have a second by Mr. Williamson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So that passes as well. Application, if anything else, I guess we can open up for public comment. So we do have the Lagoon Grant, program application as well looked over.
It doesn't include the map.
Ms. Essen, do you have anything to add to that?
Here, I think, so the attorney's office did delete the map, but so a motion to add it back. Maybe to here also, I guess I kind of understood the first motion, with the guidelines was to add the map into that section and the application, so I think use that for both. And the only other change on this application that I wanted to note was that I added one sentence on, the first page, page 2 there, section number 2, number 6. I put describe your project. Maybe you found this when you read through them, but I went through all of them and a lot of people did a very good job answering all the questions, but there was no real section where they described the entire project. So when I wrote the contracts, I had to piece a lot of things together. So I am recommending that we do add just the simple describe your project wording.
So besides the describe your project, what was the other one that we changed or that was deleted? Anything else? Nope. So we have a motion to accept that, yes, sir. No, sorry, Ms. Thompson.
I'm sorry, I have a question because, in section 2, number 6, it says, clearly, wait a minute, I'm sorry, number 7, where is the project location? Please identify the project location and why it was chosen. But then, and you said that the county attorney removed the map, but yet, if you go to the last page on page 4, required attachments, it's asking for the project boundary map. So was it removed or was it not removed?
Yes, and good question. I noticed that on 1 too, and so
I think that's the project map, but that's not the map that describes the entire area. So they've already voted to bring the entire map back in.
Exactly. So which would make 1 apply again.
I personally would like to look at a map to see where the
Where it
project's located in the lagoon.
Ms. Deborah.
So in the past, we've had 2 maps. So we've had one map that was actually courtesy of Dwayne, that was really Brevard County and the whole watershed area. And then there was a secondary map that we called the boundary. And I'm not sure how we got that name, but the project boundary map. And a lot of the projects really did like a zoomed in like a Google map kind of thing, so you could really see it close up, but larger map, give you context of where it is in the county, and then a smaller map to be more specific.
We want that back.
Mr. Renudo?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that provides for consistency, having the same map, everybody works to that.
Yeah.
Helps us as reviewers to. Better decision.
Okay, so we have a motion on accepting the addition of section 2, number 6, and the map, with the whole map and the boundary map back in this section as well. Is that right? I think that's the only changes. Mr. Walton.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the application as it is currently written with the addition of the IRL watershed map that was previously in previous year.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Williamson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, I'd like to open up for public comment. Do we have any? Okay, I want to thank everybody for bearing with me in the first meeting, and a lot of information for me. So I appreciate all the info. When people expand on stuff, so it's good information. And if I can finally get a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Mr. Venuto, did you make a motion?
No, correct.
Mr. Smith.
Correct.
Oh, it's on Mr. Smith, motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Williamson. So moved. All in favor, adjourn.
Yes, and don't forget, that's perfect, thank you.
How are you, sir? Excellent.
Remember me.